expert, A.O. Johnson. Very good to talk to you, Mr. Johnson. Give us a bit of background, first of all. This conflict has links with what happened in Libya in 2011.
Absolutely. We can go back last year when there was a coup d'etat formed by frustrated Malian soldiers who had been pushed really back by Tariq rebels who had been fighting a campaign against the government since the 90s. That frustration by those soldiers, by Captain Sanogo specifically, and actually overthrew the government. There was a power vacuum. It meant that Tariq rebels supported by al-Qaeda forces, especially with more movements, people who had actually come from Libya specifically, a lot of ammunition was brought in, a lot of battle-hardened jihadists came from around the world to bolster their cause, and they were able to take far more territory than would otherwise have been given had there been a government in place in Mali. So that's where the nucleus of this problem started. Naturally, the rebels with al-Qaeda forces have taken more territory every day. They've become that much more stronger. The Malian forces have literally melted away. And of course, the United Nations had provided a framework by which ECOWAS troops, which is a local framework body, to actually go in there and actually take the fight to the rebels. But they are not ready in terms of training or in terms of equipment. It's going to cost a lot of money. The process was going to take at least a year. But because of the problems that we've been finding on the road, on the ground in Mali currently, they've actually had to be fast-tracked. And of course, the French have been brought in on the advice and the request of the Malian President, Traoré, to actually bolster and actually soften the rebels on the ground in advance of a ground offensive.
I mean, how long do you think the French will stay involved? What are their objectives? How long do you think it'll take them to achieve them?
Well, the French are a very powerful nation, one of the most powerful nations around the world. They have a very equipped and a robust military. There's no doubt about that. They're no match for any rebels. But you're dealing with al-Qaeda. You're dealing with a rebel movement which it doesn't have an office, doesn't wear a uniform, is not easily identified, can easily melt into the population. It's actually going to be urban warfare on the ground. There's large desert region, but nonetheless, it's going to be very difficult. You can bomb them, soften them, definitely, which is what the French are looking to do. It's a short-term measure. It's got to be fast, effective, robust. But again, the ground offensive is where it will determine how successful we are in the future, and that's going to be a completely different ball game moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, how much of a humanitarian effect is all this going to have? The conflict already has had one, of course.
Absolutely. Mali specifically been chosen by al-Qaeda, which is a shame for its next offensive against the West. It's surrounded by a lot of countries, Mauritania, Guinea, Senegal, not to mention Algeria. So you can imagine all these countries are fragile countries, fragile states with fragile problems. Their infrastructure will be stretched to the limit with the influx of refugees coming into those parts of their country and seeking assistance. I think that's the whole strategy with al-Qaeda, to create confusion in the country, to destabilize the other countries around it, and actually to take the fight to the West. But the West doesn't have a choice in this. There are no other options. It's got to be a win all the way, a fight to the last, and it's going to take many years. No doubt about that. This is not a short-term measure. You could soften them, but it's going to be difficult to get rid of them altogether. You're dealing with an ideology. Their focus is very much about creating a Sharia state, an Islamic state, and that's going to be very difficult. At the moment, women's rights are being curtailed. People who carry out petty crimes, their arms and limbs are being chopped off. So it's the most aggressive form. So it's going to be very difficult to change the mindsets over time. I think it will take at least a generation. Sadly, the West hasn't picked up this fight. This is a fight that's been determined by al-Qaeda, and a shame. It's going to take a long time, but I think the French are doing the best they possibly can.
I mean, you mentioned the amount of time it's going to take. I mean, could initially welcomed broadly the French intervention, but it is, of course, the former colonial power here. Could resentment grow about its operations there if it goes on for a long time? That's
the problem the French has got. The best hope is for a quick victory, which I think is unlikely. The longer it goes, we're looking at insurgency would likely to happen. We can see something that's happening in Iraq and Afghanistan, where the local population thinks that they've overstayed their welcome. Again, the French are not going alone on this. It's a regional conflict which involves so many other countries across West Africa, and an international dimension, which is why they're involved, and other countries would have to support. I think it's a difficult call for all concerned, but you can't on one hand say you don't get involved because you don't have a choice. On the other hand, there are the ramifications and the problems moving forward with the examples I've just expressed with Al Qaeda in Iraq and Afghanistan. But again, we can actually see that these sort of movements are becoming that much more prevalent in West Africa. We see in Somalia with Al Shabaab. We actually see with Boko Haram in Nigeria. The Nigerian troops are going to form the largest contingency among the ECOWAS and ECOMOG troops that will be going to do the fighting. They're also battle hardened. They've got a good track record across West Africa, done other fightings and creating democracy in other parts of West Africa over time. But this is a completely different ballgame and a different kettle of fish altogether.
Well, Mr. Johnson, thanks for all that background. A.O. Johnson there. The NSPCC has launched a campaign urging people to act quickly if they suspect a child is being abused, as the charity's latest study suggests that fewer than 1 in 5 people would voice any concern.